All right, we continue to stay on top of the breaking news today. President Joe Biden withdrawing from the presidential race.
That's right. Lawmakers here in Massachusetts were part of the dozens calling on him to step aside in the last few weeks, including one of the first Democrats to make that decision. Take a look. A shakeup to the 2024 presidential race. President Joe Biden bowing out of his re-election bid, writing in a letter on social media, quote, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down," pivoting immediately to an endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris.
I'm thrilled to endorse the vice president to be the next president of the United States.
Democrats from across the country falling in line behind the VP. Massachusetts Representatives Jake Auchincloss and Seth Moulton both backing Harris.
She has the energy, the vitality, the vision, and the courage to win this race against Donald Trump.
I'm endorsing Kamala Harris. I think we should have a transparent and accountable process. But as a superdelegate, my vote will be for her.
Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey doing the same, along with Representatives McGovern, Trahan, Presley, Keating, and McGovern. Governor Moore Healey saying in a statement, quote, "President Biden's decision today not to seek re-election is the ultimate example of putting the country first."
Joe Biden is handing over power because it's in the best interests of the country. That's a sentence Donald Trump could never say. And Democrats now are going to be able to campaign on passing the torch to the next generation.
Congressman Moulton was among the first to call for the president to resign.
But it was the right thing to do.
Calling the decision difficult but necessary, with the Democratic Party now free to unify ahead of its August convention.
More than half the country did not want either Biden or Trump to be the nominee. One party has said, "We hear you, America, and we're making a change."
Now let's bring in NBC Boston political commentator Sue O'Connell to talk through all of this and everything that's happening. Sue, those calls on Biden to withdraw, they've been growing for nearly a month at this point. What in your mind was the final straw here?
Well, Matt, it might have been like the final bale of straws. Starting last week, of course, every day we heard from a Democratic lawmaker asking Joe Biden to step aside, from people like Seth Moulton, who called Biden a mentor, and today Joe Manchin, right? And Biden kept saying, "Show me the polls." So this weekend, exclusive new Free Press poll came out of likely Michigan voters, showed Donald Trump with a 7-point lead over Joe Biden. So Michigan, of course, as we keep saying, an important swing state. And then you have Representative Nancy Pelosi, who has obviously stepped aside from her leadership position, but not so much, because she was just going to keep those calls coming until Biden finally saw the light.
All right, Sue, if past this prologue, let's take a look at the last time this happened. 1968, President Lyndon Johnson withdrew from the race, facing a lot of scrutiny. Any lessons Democrats can learn from that history, even though it feels like a lifetime ago?
All right, Corey, I was actually alive when this happened, okay, with LBJ. Happy to be here today as well. But there's a lot of similarities between LBJ and Biden. One rarely talked about is that Johnson also had concerns about his health. He died just 4 years after leaving office, the same time, the same year that Biden was sworn in as senator. But Johnson announced he wasn't running in March. And then we had the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The Vietnam War got worse, and there were riots all across the country. If the Democrats had picked their nominee, who was eventually LBJ's Vice President Hubert Humphrey, earlier, Richard Nixon might not have won. So the best course for the Democrats, I think, would be to pick and get behind a nominee quickly.
Safe to say, Corey and I were not around for that. This is a first for us. I'll say that. Let's keep in mind.
Next time this happens.
Right. Let's keep in mind, Sue, we're just coming off of the Republican National Convention, not to mention Donald Trump's assassination attempt, Joe Biden even getting COVID last week. Could all of those play a role into Biden reaching this decision?
Yeah, I think so, but more so reaching it this weekend. The Republican convention, I think, was a win for the Republicans. Trump seemed vital. I mean, he's talking about Hannibal Lecter, but it wasn't a disaster for the Republicans. So I think maybe that pushed a decision that was coming anyway.
All right, Sue O'Connell live for us in the newsroom. Sue, as always, we appreciate the insight. Sue and Matt are going to have much more tonight on the NBC 10 Boston News at 11. In the meantime, NBC 10 will still have coverage of Biden's announcement for you. You can get the latest updates on air and online at NBC10Boston.com.